Today I will be reading from the Christian Science Sentinel, an article from May 27th, 1985, titled "The Calm During the Storm" by Jeffrey Wells Davis. Storms that bring rain, wind, or snow are not the only kind of tempest we face. Sometimes we have to deal with emotional storms. For example, we may be experiencing pressure at work, having family or marriage difficulties, or we may just be nervous or scared about an upcoming duty. Often we hear the news media about the storm of controversy surrounding an individual or an event. All of these have one common element. They would persuade us that man can be separated from the calm and peace that characterize God's nature. Christian Science teaches that God is infinite, supreme good, and that inharmony has no place in His realm. The Bible provides plenty of examples of the peace that comes from God. For an instance, the psalmist writes, "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." Elijah saw God's true nature during a low point in his life, in danger because Jezebel wanted to kill him. He fled to a cave in the wilderness to escape her wrath. While he was in the cave, there was a great wind, an earthquake, and a fire. The Bible tells us that the Lord was not in any of these violent and destructive events. But after them, He appeared to Elijah through a still, small voice. Perhaps God was showing Elijah that he was not the author of discord and violence, but of peace and calm. Mrs. Eddy saw that inner calm comes from a realization of God's allness. She writes in Science and Health, "The Christian scientist will be calm in the presence of both sin and disease, knowing as he does that life is God and God is all." Doesn't this give us a basis for refusing to accept any discord or storm in our experience? Since God is all, there can be no room for anything unlike His harmonious nature. An experience a friend of mine had several years ago demonstrated that a true understanding of God's allness can show us how to escape a storm. Driving alone through a part of the country known for its destructive storms, he heard dire weather forecasts predicting heavy thunderstorms and tornadoes ahead of him. Immediately, he turned off the radio and turned to God to calm his thought. For some time, he prayed to see, as Elijah did, that God could not be in a storm. And since God is all, there could be no destruction in His universe. Eventually, the rain did come, and it came hard. In fact, it got so heavy that my friend had to pull his car off the road, as he could not see anything ahead of him. Looking for a reassuring thought in the midst of the fierce rain, wind, thunder, and lightning, he opened his copy of the Christian Science textbook, Science and Health. His eyes fell on Mrs. Eddy's sentence, "Wait patiently for divine love to move upon the waters of mortal mind and form the perfect concept." My friend saw clearly at that point that God, divine love, was all-powerful, so there could be no harm from the storm. He was completely at peace. Within moments, the rain let up considerably, and he was able to continue his journey. Hours later, he turned the radio on again and heard a news report saying that there had been no property damage and no loss of life, despite the expectation that the storm would bring destruction. My friend's prayers and those of others aware of the situation did not stop the rain and wind. But those characteristics that are violent and destructive never appeared. In proportion as one's consciousness is filled with the calming thought of God's omnipresence, one gains a greater sense of dominion over his environment and can expect to see more harmony manifested. Christ Jesus proved that storms have no place in God's universe. He saw more clearly than anyone else that man's natural state is peaceful. It cannot be disrupted by either physical forces or emotional stress. While he was traveling with his disciples on a ship, a storm of wind came up. The frightened disciples asked him to help, and he did. The Master rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. We too can rise above such storms by seeing the allness of God and filling our consciousness with thoughts of His omnipresence. In fact, we can view storms as opportunities to prove God's omnipotence. Mrs. Eddy writes, "My faith in God and in His followers rests in the fact that He is infinite good and that He gives His followers opportunity to use their hidden virtues, to put into practice the power which lies concealed in the calm, and which storms awaken to vigor and to victory. Armed with a clear understanding of God and His allness, we don't have to restrict ourselves to seeing only the calm before the storm. Should a tempest arise, we can, with great joy, perceive the calm instead of the storm. Thank you for joining us today.